Hi, I'm really excited to share NotebookLM with you today with the use case of using NotebookLM to analyze a particular company on the London Stock Exchange. So this is a very real world use case. So what we've got here on the screen is NotebookLM, as you can see, set up on this particular notebook for HFG, which is the EPIC code for Hilton Food Group. As you probably know, NotebookLM has three windows. On the left-hand side, you've got sources. In the middle, you've got the chat area. And on the right-hand side, you've got the studio. Today, I'd like to just share with you a quick idea that I've got about how we could use a notebook for each company and store the information. So what I've loaded in here by way of resources is the interim results, as you can see, and trading update from the 5th of November. Then I've got a couple of charts, a 2-year chart and a longer chart that I think is about 17 years long, so that we can see the pattern of the price movement. From ShareScope, we've got the table showing the balance sheet data, the cash flow statement data, and the income statement data. Also from ShareScope, a couple of other features like the forecast for net borrowings, price forecast, and turnover forecast. I've got the trading update there, which has got today's date on it, the 9th. First of all, in the chat window, there's some sliders at the top, which enables us to configure the notebook. And I could customize it, which I probably would do long term to make it a bit more focused, but I'm just going to use the standard setting for analyst, for business orientated strategy and decision making. And I can choose the response for longer or shorter. So I'll save that. And that affects the results of any queries in here. So if I just go to my prompt list, and I'm going to grab a prompt, which I've tailored it to suit HFG. I'll paste it in there, and it reads, "You're a professional stock analyst with expert abilities to analyze both fundamental and technical analysis aspects of a stock. Please analyze the information provided for Hilton Food Group, HFG, and provide an analysis report of around 2,000 words using appropriate headings according to the context of the information." And then I go on to talk about the cash flow balance sheet and so on. And you can see already it's come up with some additional questions I could ask. I'll park those for the moment. So on my clock on the computer, it's 12:42, and I'll press that and see how long it takes to analyze. It's just gone over to 12:43 on my clock, so it'll probably do this within a minute. So it's analyzing all these sources of data on the left-hand side. It's going to produce me a report much, much quicker than I would ever have a chance of doing in reality. I'd have to print all the documents out, go through it, analyze it, abstract it, get my thoughts about what I want to say, and produce the report. All of that's taking place in the time that I'm telling you about what it's doing. And I suspect that will be within a minute or two. We'll find out in a moment. I should say that I'm running this through a Chrome browser, so I'm not running the desktop NotebookLM, and it's produced it. So that's 12:43. It's very quick. And if I just scroll to the top, you'll see a couple of things. You'll see, first of all, you've got a summary of the sources. So it's telling us what's in there. Then there's my prompt, which I gave it. And then here's the report underneath. So it gives an executive summary. I'm not going to read it all to you. Business overview. I will just point out that these little circular references enable you to go back and see where it got the information from. So you can see here, as I hover over it, it tells me which that's come from the interim results, as you can see. And I could, if I wanted to, go back and check that, but it just enables you to see that this is not information that NotebookLM has created by hallucinating it. It's real information. It's operating in a closed environment where it's not able to access the internet, because I've chosen not to let it access the internet, getting it to work on real data, because this might influence whether I invest my real money in this stock or not. So going down the page, you can see we've got the financial analysis, as I instructed it to do. It's got sections: income statement, balance sheet, cash flow statement. There's the net debt, which has decreased, as you can see. It's got strategic initiatives as a heading, multi-category expansion. So you've got seafood, vegan and vegetarian products, supply chain enhancement, farm to fork influence, working right through the food chain. And it's got risk factors, raw material price volatility, competition, and so on. Technical analysis has put a section in as I required it to do. If I hover over these, you can see that it's got references. For example, it's got financial instruments which are carried at cost. It's got a conclusion and recommendations and disclaimer. I'm going to save that to a note. In doing so, it's going to appear on the right-hand side. Then I could, if I wanted to, go and either put further questions in and get it to tell me the answers to my queries. I'll pass on that for the moment because I want to go over here and show you a couple of things. First is that if I click this note, which is taken from the middle over to the studio, now I learned from getting my fingers burned that if I don't move it over here and then I refresh it, then I'm going to lose that. So I take it over as a saved note. If I like the contents of the note, which I do, I like that style of report, I can convert it to a source, and then that will appear over on the left-hand side. Right at the bottom here, you'll see we've got that report, and it gives us a summary as well, which is useful because it tells us what the key points are. Then I'll go back and I should be able to rename that to put in today's date. That's saved it away there on the left-hand side now. Let me just roll up my picture out of the way so that we can see the studios on the right-hand side, because it's this audio overview that I want to focus on in a moment. Before I do that, I could also do a couple of other things. I could produce an FAQ, which if I do that, it generates it here, because that will give you some other questions that you might want to ask. I could bring any of those questions back over here if I wanted any elaboration on them. I don't for today, but you can see how you can create quite a detailed analysis of the company from the available information. What I'm interested in is getting a conversation that I can hopefully interrogate. So I'm going to customize this, and I'll pick up my prompt and drop it in here, and it's still able to generate. This prompt must be less than 500 characters, and I cannot generate it. I'm just going to take a word out. Let's take the word formal out and see if that brings it back in. It does. That brings us back into 500 characters. And I'll put a bit of humor here. I've said about subscribing to this podcast as it helps keep us in a job. That's just to show you how you can influence the podcast by the tone of the podcast and so on. Now, it's 12:50 on my clock on my computer, and it's generating a conversation. So while it's doing that, let me just show you that you can also create a briefing document or a study guide. So a study guide would be particularly useful if this was a topic, say, where a student or a researcher wanted to learn it. So you wanted some questions and answers. I'm going to use the briefing document because that's perhaps going to be more use for me to put a summary with this podcast on, for example, a website post about this trading update today, which I might well do on DIYinvestors.com. But I'll click briefing note, and while it's still generating the conversation, the podcast, it's also generating a new note, and you can see that here. There's a new note on the briefing. So I could click that to open it up, and it's quite a detailed briefing, as you can see. I can do two things. I can convert that to source, or I can leave it there. I will convert it to a source because that might be useful. Let me show you one thing you can do. Well, if I copy that and close it, I can add a note, which then means I can edit it. I'm just going to put on the bottom of that today's date. So I'll put that in bold and go back to the top. I need to give it a name. So I'm going to put it in here, today's date, and I'm just going to put HFG briefing note, then in brackets from analysis, now stored with my heading. And again, if I wanted to, I can convert that to a source. So I will do that just to store it away in that vault of information, because I can delete it from that vault, but I don't want to lose it if I inadvertently were to delete it here. So my podcast is now finished, 13 minutes and 21 seconds long. And the first thing I'll do is just download that onto my computer so there's no risk of me losing it. The really interesting thing with NotebookLM is on the paid version, I can have interactive mode, and this is particularly powerful. In a moment, I will click this button to play the podcast, and then I'm going to interrupt it and see if we can get a response from the two hosts. They'll answer the question, and then they should go back to it. I'll click this little button here, and then in a moment, you'll see me click the join button and ask a question.
Welcome, everyone, to another meeting of the DIY Investors community. It's great to see so many of you here. And for those of you joining for the first time, a very warm welcome. Just a quick reminder before we kick off, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel and like this podcast.
Keep us in a job.
Exactly. And as always, we really encourage you to spake your hand at any time if you have any questions. Today, we are diving into a company that has got us all a little bit puzzled.
Yeah.
Hilton Food Group, or HFG, as it's known on the market.
HFG is such an interesting case, isn't it? They're a real major player in the global food market. They supply meat, seafood, and even vegan and vegetarian products to retail partners literally all over the world. We're talking 24 facilities across 19 markets in Europe, Asia Pacific, and North America.
That is a lot of burgers and plant-based patties.
It is a lot of food.
Well, hey there. Want to share your thoughts on this?
Yeah, hi. Sorry to interrupt you as you're starting, but I just wanted to know what you thought about the net debt position for HFG.
That's a great question, and it's definitely something worth unpacking right at the beginning.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in so early. It's great to get right into what's on your mind.
So looking at HFG's net debt position, we see that as of June 30th, 2024, it sits on 137 million pounds.
Okay, and that's compared to what exactly?
Well, they've actually been reducing their debt. It was 216.5 million pounds in July 2023 and 139.7 meters at the end of 2023.
So it's been steadily decreasing.
Exactly, which is a positive sign.
And that's not all, right?
Precisely. What's fascinating here is that their net debt to adjusted EBITDA ratio is also very healthy.
And that ratio sits at?
It's at 0.9 times, which is a very manageable level.
For those of you who might be new to this.
Yeah.
EBITDA is essentially a measure of a company's operating profitability. The lower the debt to EBITDA ratio, the better a company is at managing its debt.
This all tells us they aren't over-leveraged, and they have a good handle on their financial obligations.
Absolutely. So it paints a pretty reassuring picture.
It's important to note that it also gives them some flexibility to pursue their strategic priorities.
Right, like those international expansions, new product launches, and investments in technology we talked about earlier.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you again, but I just wondered what you thought about their plans to expand into Canada.
Oh, hey, no problem at all. We love that you're so engaged.
Yeah, it's great to hear your thoughts, and Canada is a really interesting point.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole Canada expansion plan. It's a pretty big deal for them.
It is. So, as you may have heard, they're partnering with Walmart. It's their first move into North America.
Right, and they are planning to launch Hilton Foods Canada in 2027.
This isn't just a small step. It's a bold move into a huge market.
Absolutely, and it's a really good example of their strategic priority to grow their international footprint.
What's fascinating here is that it really shows their ambition and confidence in their model.
And it's a key part of their plan for long-term growth.
It definitely is, and it will be very interesting to see how it develops.
So thanks for bringing that up. It's an important part of their strategy.
For sure, and I think that it helps. Hey, yeah, what's up?
Yeah, sorry for a third interruption, but unfortunately I can't stay for the whole podcast. But on behalf of my members that are listening and watching, I wondered if you're able to look at the secondary technical indicators on the price charts and in particular on balance volume, and let me know what you think about that.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, thanks for the heads up, and we really appreciate you squeezing in that question before you go.
Absolutely. It's great to know what's on the minds of your members, too.
Okay, so let's dive into the technicals then and see what we can find out about the on-balance volume for HFG.
So on-balance volume, or OBV, is a technical indicator that uses volume to predict price changes.
Right. It essentially looks at whether volume is flowing into or out of a stock, and if buying or selling pressure is building up.
What's fascinating here is that this information is not necessarily visible just from looking at price charts alone.
So what is the OBV telling us right now?
Well, from a technical perspective, there's a cautious outlook for HFG's share price in the near term.
Yeah, we've talked about this before. The downtrend is pretty clear, and the break from the long-term uptrend is concerning.
The established downtrend suggests further downside potential, but the OBV adds another layer to this picture.
So what does the OBV reveal? Is it confirming the downward trend, or is it hinting at something different?
The OBV is showing signs of weakness. It's not a completely bearish picture, but it's not exactly bullish either.
Okay, that sounds like it's confirming the trend. But does that confirm that the smart money is leaving?
What's interesting is that whilst there is weakness, the OBV isn't showing a massive exodus of volume.
That means investors aren't rushing to the exits right now.
Right. It suggests that the recent selling pressure hasn't been accompanied by huge volume.
This could mean that the downtrend might not be as strong as it looks, so it's a bit of a mixed bag.
Precisely, the OBV confirms there's underlying weakness, but it's also not showing a strong conviction to sell.
So it's a little bit like a tug of war between sellers and those that are still holding on, even at these prices.
Exactly. So what this tells us is that investors should keep a close eye on upcoming financial releases.
Right, and how HFG is addressing those challenges in the vegan and vegetarian segment.
That would help investors and traders gauge the potential for any trend reversal.
Okay, so that's a pretty good snapshot of what's going on technically with HFG using OBV.
Yes, and remember that technical indicators like the OBV are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right, we always have to consider the fundamentals and also the wider economic landscape.
Yeah, so it's important to look at all of those before making any decisions.
And thanks for bringing that up.
Okay, so we'll leave that there, but you can see how powerful this interactive feature of NotebookLM is. On the very day that the trading update's released, I'm able to add that to my vault of information for Hilton Food Group, create an analysis, create a podcast, and then interact with it. Very powerful, lots of applications for investing, and I would wholeheartedly suggest that you take a look at NotebookLM for yourself just to see the power of it. And I think we'll probably end here, and thank you for watching and listening.